And we're on. What's up, everybody? This is Crowe with Shortbox. We're doing another Shortbox interviews. I'm joined by my my buddy Kevin. Kevin, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Kevin from Shortboxed. I do
Even
all
after
the
I gave half the information, like it was immediately wrong for me to throw that.
I do business development
Immediately
here. I've managed comic shops. I love talking with creators, especially ones I'm fans of. So really happy to have you both here with us today. We're joined today by Freddie Williams II and Cullen Bunn, both the creators for the Godzilla versus the Power Rangers and other amazing work, which we'll get into. So thank you guys both for joining us today.
Thanks for having us on.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, we're super pumped. I mean, we were just talking before we started recording, which I guess we'll recapture now in conversation with the audience. But we have various. Cullen and I kind of have a shared connection from our personal lives. So that was always interesting. I got introduced to Cullen via a friend of his, and very early work. So that was exciting. We were talking about that, and we were just also talking before Cullen came on to Freddie about how we got introduced to his work and how well, I guess for me, honestly, Freddie, it was this cover that was like really me being like, whoa, what is going on here? And that's what I was like, we have to talk to them. So anyways, that's my personal story. Kevin, you know them. Kevin used to run a shop, as we said. So
I was we were, like Crow said, we were chatting a little before, but I'll say it again. Freddie, your work just stands out on the shelves. People come looking for it. The Batman Turtles stuff was just so well done that it's I find it pretty uncommon to see these sort of big property crossovers happen repeatedly, and people coming in trying to get every cover and trying to, really capture what you're putting out there. So I'm a huge fan of your art. It's one of those things that just sort of sticks in your head. It's got this sort of like polished but also pencil wise sort of coloring to it. It really stands out. Contour lines and everything are really like on point. I'm a big graffiti guy from when I was younger, so I like seeing some of those elements and that added into the coloring that you use. And then Cullen,
yeah,
absolutely, man. Yeah. And Cullen, I've been a huge fan for a really long time. Harrow County was probably the book that got me into horror, because it wasn't like your run-of-the-mill shock and awe, like, slasher, whatever type horror book. Very cerebral, and something that it was a very easy book to recommend and just sell constantly at the shops that I managed. So big fan of your work there. X-Men Blue, some of the main stuff that you've done there, as well as like even recent stuff like Trauma Team from Cyberpunk was super fun to read. Yeah, that entire franchise has really blown up since the anime came out. And so I did a little reading back into my collection and pulled those Trauma Team issues out. They were just such good storytelling, which is saying something for like a little 4-issue series tied onto this gigantic piece of, or this giant universe of stories. I thought it was a really cool entry into comic books for that franchise. So very well done there.
Thank you.
Yeah, man. So we've established I'm a huge fan of both you guys. And I, it's one of those things that now when Crow was telling me we're gonna do this interview, I did a little smash through the Godzilla Power Rangers stuff, and man, it was super fun. I mean, I don't consider myself a major Power Rangers fan. I love the franchise, but not, there's some diehards out there, and I could see how it appeals to. It's got some real cross fan support and interest. So it was a really fun read. Thanks for putting that out there, you guys.
Did you happen to pick up the new trade that just came out, or is that?
We're getting it sent to us.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. It's not so much an interview; it's more we're gonna say nice things to you, and
yeah.
I love it. Let's do that.
Yeah, it's great. It's great.
So I've got some questions. So one of the big things I always wonder about when we have people who are working on IP that is transcendental of any single person, right? So Godzilla obviously just celebrated, I don't know, the 68th birthday, which is incredible. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers been around since the early 90s. I mean, I was watching it when I was, going to soccer practice as a kid. So now you've got these two IPs. One, it has such legacy in like film, and then obviously other media, Godzilla, and then you have this other IP that means so much to like the current era of I'm gonna say this like a robot, the people with buying power, right? The current folks who are like really bringing who are really investing in the current culture in terms of like media and that kind of thing. I'm talking about middle-aged people. So that's the nice way I'm trying to like get around.
Let's just call it what it is.
Like
right?
I'm starting to get the grades. How do you take on, and this is for both of you, obviously. How do you take on characters that everybody knows and love, especially when, I mean, Godzilla is his own thing because he's not. I actually think you were talking about this in another interview I was watching you two do. He doesn't have. He's a reptile mind, but he doesn't have motivations like humans do. And so how do you even begin to write that and make that? There's so many questions here, but let's start with the IP question. How do you grab that and say, okay, I'm going to make this mine, but also respect the history?
You know, I can't speak for Freddie, but I've been preparing for this all my life.
Yeah.
I mean, Godzilla maybe it's hard to remember, but Godzilla may be my first hero, like the first character that I really connected with. And I do remember that the first thing I ever tried to write when I was very young, pre-kindergarten, was this thing called, I called it War of the Monsters, and it had Godzilla and Mothra, and I wrote and drew it, and it had King Kong. It had all the monsters I could think of, and, you know, attacking the United States. And so I've been wanting to do, you know, I love Godzilla. I love having the opportunity to play in that playground. And Power Rangers, look, I was a little too old when Power Rangers came out, but I was sitting there in front of the television watching that first episode when it aired. And I remember, because I had just moved into an apartment, I didn't even have furniture. I was sitting on the floor watching that episode of Power Rangers when it first aired. And I think for me, it's just a matter of channeling that excitement and that love and sort of the respect of those two franchises, and trying to show that, and everything I write in it and everything I think about with those characters is, there are people out there who love these characters just as much as me, just more than me, and I try to always keep that in mind.
Yeah,
you did a great job of capturing the voices of all the Power Rangers. I was impressed by that, and of course, what you did on Godzilla. Like, I feel like you know Godzilla like a friend of yours. You know, like you've been in Godzilla's head for years and years and years. So, and I basically just wrote you know, I just went with what you had written, because it was so it captured the voice of both. It's an interesting dynamic of having Godzilla, who's, you know, kind of scary and like can be really, really catastrophically dangerous, in, you know, and the Power Rangers mixing together as far as those types of properties. Because Power Rangers seem so cheerful most of the time, and I think Cullen did an awesome job of mixing those and creating a cohesive story out of that.
And I gotta say, thanks guys for not doing the Godzilla cop out, not making him like a friendly character at the end. Like, I love the fact that as soon as, you know, there's the battle seems wrapped, no, Godzilla's still there. He's still a monster. You know, like, I feel like that could have gone a couple different directions, and it hit the mark. It was very well done at the ending there.
It's a tough balance, because we wanted Godzilla to be the current iteration of Toho Godzilla, right? We wanted him to be sort of this more of a force of nature than friendly, you know, doing drop kicks and dancing Godzilla. Which I love.
We love that.
I also
nothing
love
wrong
that
with
too.
that.
We love that too. Yeah.
But it's interesting because of the subject matter with the introducing the Power Rangers and Rita into the mix. You get that flair of that 70s, you know, the 70s era Godzilla, and so it was definitely a balancing act to try to get that vibe while still making it sort of the force of nature Godzilla.
And I liked how you guys gave like Rita a voice to sort of comment on like the difference between the Rita monsters and the actual kaiju monsters that were in the book. She's like, you don't control them completely psychologically? Pathetic, like it's like, oh, that is such a freaking Rita thing to say. And she's getting to like do some commentary on these different genres that have been smashed together into a book. Like, it was really, really fun to read.
Yeah, and it makes it clear, like, Godzilla is deadly serious. Like,
yeah,
I mean, if nothing else, like, the tone of the artwork hopefully would also convey that, but she's making it explicitly clear that there's such a power difference and an attitude, or whatever, an air about Godzilla that's different about the monsters that she's used to, that she's basically shocked. It's like it drives her out of her mind a couple of times how tough Godzilla is and how indomitable Ghidorah is. I think it was great. Cullen wrote a bunch of stuff that was fantastic. Great opportunities for me to, that I really enjoyed drawing that sort of stuff.
Yeah, dude, you got to draw King Ghidorah. That's awesome. Like, cool. All the monsters are so cool.
And you're part of the history now. I mean, whoa. I mean, maybe it doesn't seem like I don't know how it seems, but like, that's cool.
Well, I think it's something that'll stick,
Those little observations of the differences between the two genres, that was not planned from the beginning. That was stuff that came up as I'm working on it, as we're seeing it come together, because it was really for me. And look, and I'm not going to do it, not while we're recording. As I'm writing Rita, I'm talking in Rita's voice, and I'm waving my arms, and I'm trying to channel it. When I'm writing the Power Rangers, I'm moving as they talk. and it was really, for me, it was because the monsters in the Power Rangers universe all have, sort of, they're full of puns. They're always,
they're rubber chicken kaijus, right?
If it's baseball themed, he's like, get ready, batter up, and he's and I really, one of my favorite little beats in the story is when Gigan is teamed up with a couple of those, and they're making their puns, and
the rhino guy and the eyeball guy, right?
And then Gigan's just like, like, well, this guy's not much for words.
Man, another great conversationalist.
So that was sort of a fun surprise that came about while working on this, is those comparisons they could make.
Well, also strange to have Rita, who is historically this batshit insane character, actually being the straight man, right? The somebody who makes the meta commentary, who at some point takes the perspective of the reader, being like, I don't believe this is happening. How could you allow this not to be controlled? Like, as a reader, we're like, oh, Rita, yes, we get you. It's a rare thing for us to be able to commiserate with a villain like that.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Look, I'm trying to talk in her voice as I'm writing, but I don't know how much we want to really get into Rita's head. She's a disaster. I mean, she's like an embodiment of disaster and chaos.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. She's a monster too. She just doesn't have all the tentacles and the eyeballs and the rhino horns,
Yeah.
She's a little batshit nuts. Which I think is like the staying power of that character, right? Like, there's always a crazy, and she's just like a timeless crazy. I don't think people that love the fandom, at this point, have any misconceptions about that character or what she's done. Like, no one's really tried to do it any differently, for a good reason.
Real Joker energy, honestly. Real Joker energy.
Yeah. 100%.
Cullen, I loved how you were talking about when you were young. Also, cool to know that, like, pre-kindergarten, that you had a concept of, like, the United States as an entity. I didn't. And so, like, it being attacked would have been totally above me.
Listen, they defeated Godzilla by dropping a sword on his head from a helicopter. So I can't say that they were really an organized entity in my mind back then.
I think that
they certainly had a supply of giant swords that they could drop on monsters' heads if they needed to.
That would have been very confusing, but enticing to me as a child to read that, like, giant swords, being like, that must happen. That must happen.
Yeah, that's right.
So I loved your sort of origin story there with Godzilla being your first hero. Freddie, what about you? Where did you kind of get started?
so Godzilla has, of course, been around since before I was born. Whenever I was young, I remember a few times watching, reruns, and there was two instances that come to mind really whenever I'm thinking about Godzilla. The first one is that whenever I was sick and at home with a fever, there was some black and white Godzilla movie that was on. It might have been the first one, like the English version of it, with Steve Martin in it. But there was like I had a fever, and so watching it was kind of like this weird surreal experience that somehow led, because the first movie focuses a lot on the destruction that Godzilla created and how catastrophic it is for all these people, like the survivors. It's traumatic, and so I was identifying with them with this fevered brain, and made it feel much more scary or real. And then also whenever I was maybe a little bit older, I remember me and a bunch of family, like my aunt and a bunch of cousins and stuff, watched there was some sort of TV marathon on with lots of commercial breaks, but we were watching a whole bunch of Godzilla stuff. So I kind of associated that, and that was much more in the tongue-in-cheek, where like Godzilla would kind of like shake hands with another monster if they're working together. And so anyway, it's like I feel like I grew up with him almost like a historical figure that I got to he's just as real to me as Abraham Lincoln or something,
Yeah.
Like, yeah,
100%.
Yeah, and then
classic duo.
Yeah, Abraham Lincoln and Godzilla, classic duo. And for the Power Rangers, I was in high school whenever they came out, and the schedule of when it would air on TV was in the morning. At least it was where I was living in Kansas, and it would, like, by the time I had to leave for the bus in the morning, only about the first 5 or 10 minutes of the episode would have played, so I never got to see how episodes resolved. And my first impression of the Power Rangers was that there wasn't much action in it, because I never got to see the part where they would fight, which of course now in retrospect is a completely strange observation or assumption that that's how the series was. So I've got to rewatch. There's like a playlist on YouTube of a bunch of Power Rangers episodes that I actually had on in the background quite a bit while I was drawing, to kind of get into the mindset. And I love the sort of craft of the Zords, and how when the Megazord would move around, the sort of like plastic suit stuff would kind of bounce around and stuff. But very, very charming, much more charming than a lot of the CG graphics and stuff that are going on nowadays. So anyway, I got much more into it in the last year because of the crossover and stuff.
There was something really accessible, especially as a kid at the same time, about those shows. Like there was another show called VR Troopers, which had that same sort of plasticky, we know that we're fake. It was still in that era. Even the adult versions of fantasy shows like Xena or Hercules was still just like kitschy enough for you to like be able to jump into, but also made it feel like it was supposed to be like good lighthearted entertainment. And now when you watch shows, I mean, I think that's pretty hard to find, because everything is CGI, and like even if you watch something like what's a show like Stargirl, for example, still so well done that it's hard to just appreciate the entertainment value of like, oh, they're inhabiting a fantasy world and it's not real, because everything is so glistening and I mean, I'm not shitting on new technology. I love CGI.
No, I get it. There's a variety of special effects. They all have their place. Mm-hmm. It's just my personal taste. It's like anything with art or something like that they all have their place, but physical, practical in-camera effects, especially on a budget, so that they lend themselves to being a little bit more campy, has a charm that I don't see replicated in any other type of special effects. So at least for me, I really enjoy that element of the older movies and TV shows.
And it's hard for me to think of a franchise that's seen so many iterations and side stories or other groups of Rangers or things like that without any major effort to bring in that sort of new technology and special effects and features. And when I was younger, a big thing that stuck out, and I think why it resonated with so many people that are our age now, is because it wasn't a show that your parents would watch. There's a lot of content that they put out there, and they try to make it a little bit for the adults, but mostly for the kids. But Power Rangers was just like totally unapologetically like, this is for the kids. We're going to have fun, and the formula works. We're not going to change it. And then you kind of flip over to the other side, and you've got Godzilla, who started out as like the rubbery kaiju monster, and through you know, the Netflix anime movies and some of the more modern movies has totally taken a shift in where that character's gone. And it's mostly for the adults. I mean, kids can still get into it, but I mean, when I watched the Netflix Godzilla anime, I was just like struck immediately by like, this is not just like a anime show. This is like an adult movie with a force of nature that you can barely see most times. You know, part of him is always obscured by the clouds or the destruction. And they've really like developed that property out, whereas Power Rangers has just seen more and more and more Power Ranger reiterations. But I don't know. I really like the Power Ranger stuff because when I was younger, it was mine. You know, it wasn't something I'd turn on and my parents would sit down and watch it with me. They would like, oh, he's watching Power Rangers. Go make dinner, you know?
Just to get away from the kid for 5 seconds.
Yeah.
As they like shake over the cup of coffee. So I love it, again, talking about we're young, and we've talked about some of the things we've consumed in media to like help us or help you. I didn't create anything that helped you create what Mighty Morphin Power Rangers and Godzilla. But what other? This is sort of a more general question, not necessarily related to this, although we have touched upon a sort of shared history of monsters. Cullen, I'm again, pardon me, Freddie. I'm more familiar with Cullen's work than yours, so I might directly speak to him, but it's also useful. I also think when you hear it from you, I know, Cullen, you've got like your work for me is a lot of like dark horror stuff. I'm thinking like the Tooth obviously was surreal, like Gogolian even. So like where does that come from for you? What are your influences as a writer? And then Freddie, I would love to hear your influences as an artist as well. And Kevin might be able to elucidate more on the art stylings there.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's again, for better or worse, I wear my influences on my sleeve. It's you know, and I'm not ashamed of where I came from, because this is the stuff that shaped me. And I have loved monsters and weird science fiction and fantasy. I mean, since I was a kid. I was that kid. I was into Godzilla. I was into Dungeons and Dragons. I was into Doctor Who. I was into all those things, and it just stuck with me. And, you know, over the years, things have cycled out of my awareness, and then other things cycle in. And it's somewhere along the way, I really got into horror fiction, primarily prose stuff, even more than comics. And that's just all, you know, it just it informs everything that I work on. I mean, if you look around back here, you're gonna, you know, it's a flea market of monsters and robots and different creatures and old famous monsters magazines. Those things, you know, those are things that I keep them there because I remember them, but they were big influences for me, you know, in my formative years, and then in my formative years as a writer. That's the stuff I liked to gravitate back towards.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you touched on something I think is super interesting, which is like early horror, Frankenstein, maybe the first science fiction novel ever written, right, is also a horror novel, right? It is both. And so the intrinsic, like, they're both tied together. And it's really interesting to see, like, can you go in and out, what makes one the other? Do you have like again, some, they don't have whatever, but like, do you have like actual like texts that were important to you? Like, I read blank when I was 14, and this was, it informed this about me. Like, do you have a couple of those just out of curiosity?
Yeah, I mean, I read a lot of Robert E. Howard stuff, and I mean, I know everybody knows Robert E. Howard for Conan, but he also wrote a ton of horror stories, and some of the best horror fiction in the genre. If you look at a story like Pigeons from Hell, which is an amazing horror story that Robert E. Howard wrote, and it's even been adapted as a comic. I got one back here somewhere. I think it's been adapted a few times as comics. So, you know, those were some of the earlier horror stories I was reading. A lot of Robert Bloch short stories. And then as I got older, I really got into Stephen King, and especially short stories, and Clive Barker and Robert McCammon, and all of those writers really, you know, helped to shape me into what I wanted to do. Is I wanted to tell stories.
Yeah, and I've found personally that just gravitated more towards horror as I've gotten older because it makes me feel stuff, you know, like there's something about the genre when you're stuck reading, not stuck, but when you put yourself in this place where the majority of your pull list is big two superhero stuff, and then you get Harrow County, you know, and you're just like, oh, this is creepy, but it's beautiful.
And you just want to feel something. I just need
I
to
mean,
feel something.
it sounds kind of cliche to say, but 100%. I mean, horror to me, I still am way more inclined to pick up a horror mini than I am hop onto a new superhero title that might be ongoing with Marvel or DC. The horror stuff really surprises me more than anything else because you can do horror in so many different ways.
Yeah, I love all those genres. Listen, I love that stuff. I love writing the superhero stuff.
Yeah.
Godzilla's an easy one because I think there's such an element of horror to that character. So he's an easy transition for me. And like I said, I've been a Godzilla fan since forever. But yeah, I do gravitate back towards horror again and again.
Yeah, that's okay. We're all better for it.
Yeah.
Who's your favorite Godzilla villain, guys? Monster wise. King Ghidorah, Gigan, Mothra, Mechagodzilla. What's that?
Who's your favorite monster, Freddie?
Oh, sorry. I was actually waiting for you to say. The one that I enjoyed drawing the most was I pronounce it Gigan. I guess it's Gigan. I don't know, but Gigan.
I say Gigan. I think it's Gigan.
Yeah, because and I love when Jason the Red Ranger is like, did I just see a space chicken or whatever it was? He was like, when they flew by the porthole of the ship. Because it's exactly that, and he's really fun to draw because and he's also fun to try to simulate the sort of motions, the movements that he would make in a movie, but drawn in a still frame. But I also liked how I tried to draw Ghidorah as like he's Henri. Like I kind of picture him as being Henri's like an old-fashioned word, but he's like almost mischievous with how powerful he is.
Right.
I love drawing the two of them, but kind of for opposite reasons,
Right. Yeah. I laughed out loud at the part when they were like, avoid his hooks. They're coated with space diamonds. I laughed so hard when I read that line. I friggin' died, man. Like that was so perfectly timed and delivered. I was smashing through it to read it before our call today, and I got to that point. I was just like, okay, put it down for a sec. I gotta get a chuckle in there.
Freddie, let's talk about your influences. I was looking through your art earlier again to prepare for this, and there's a concurrent artist who was we're friends with. And we just met her earlier this year, Maria the Wolf. But I was looking at some of your turtle stuff, and I was like, wow, that's very similar. Like the really detailed, that kind of like you can feel your art. Like I feel like you can feel the texture moving. It sort of feels like alive and kind of constantly in motion, which I find the dynamic pretty satisfying. But so anyways, I was just putting those two together, and I wanted to comment on that. But also, who are your influences?
There's a long list, but the probably the bullet point list would be How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way. So that would be what John Buscema, but that was how I went to draw with shapes and stuff. And then Jim Lee, the animated movie Akira, and then also I picked up all the volumes of the manga as well. And Heroes Unlimited, which is a role-playing game book that, even though there was a whole bunch of different art in it, but it helped to open up my imagination because it got me into role-playing games, and it helped me to become an actor in my brain, which I feel influences the way that I draw because I'm trying to get inside, show the motivation with their body language and stuff. And then once I started drawing, I don't know, more often or something, so I'm talking like taking it seriously as a profession with the goal of becoming a comic book artist when I'm 14 or 15 or something like that. That was around the time that the Image comic stuff really blew up. So there's a bunch of image artists in there. Travis Charest is the first artist I ever saw that drew with ink wash, which is diluted India ink. And, he didn't invent that, but it was through his artwork that I started exploring that sort of style, which is now the majority of how I work is in diluted India ink and stuff. And I mean, Mike Mignola on the way that he creates depth with shadows, and Frank Miller.
Right.
There's a real long list of those. And then my favorite movie is the first Alien film. So I haven't really had a chance to explore a whole lot of horror stuff, but I'm also into that quite a bit as well. So I've been doing some short story stuff on the side, and a book called Artist Elite, which is there's a whole bunch of artists that are doing these short stories. And I'm the one that I'm doing in there is a horror thing that I plotted, and I would love to do more of that. So
your art is begging for a horror title. It has that really, really nice dark, the shadows, the I mean, I don't know colors.
Yeah.
Maybe do you do colors as well? You do all the things.
I have done colors on my work, but the majority of the colors that for like, you know, Godzilla versus Power Rangers, it's Andrew Dahlhaus as the colorist, and then the turtle stuff. So previous to him, it was Jeremy Caldwell. So I still work with both of those colorists, and I occasionally color stuff myself. Mm-hmm. My wife Kiki helps me to color the few things that I do color, which is more like covers and stuff. My wife and I will work on those together. So, but generally speaking, I'm working with either Andrew Dahlhaus or Jeremy Caldwell.
Yeah,
I think that you mentioned that early image art, because now that you said that, I can easily just like recall like the Max, where he's got this, you know, his crazy like shadows that are sort of like reaching out for the picture, you know, that Sam Keith stuff. I wouldn't be surprised if you were like, oh, I love Sam Keith, because that some of your art also reminds me of that early dark image stuff as well.
Yeah, the amount of texture and volume and that sort of stuff about Sam Keith's work really appeals to me. So structure wise, I think I'm more in the sort of, you know, Kevin Eastman / Peter Laird Ninja Turtle stuff, the sort of the bulkiness of the volume of those forms. And then, you know, if there's a character who's more of a mainstream superhero thing, it's more like a Jim Lee, or, you know, somebody who, you know, John Byrne or whatever. So I'm pulling influences from a lot. It would be like a super long list if I had to list it all out. But I think being influenced by a lot of different stuff helps to make it, hopefully I'm pulling from a whole bunch of different sources, so I don't feel like I'm copying any one artist. It's more like some weird, I'm the filter, but I'm taking all these influences and making something unique, hopefully.
Well, you nailed the action scenes with the Megazord and the Dragonzord. Like I don't feel like you see a lot of mech character battles where it doesn't feel real rigid. You know, there's so much movement. Like even like Megazord getting punched in the stomach, it just looked like a dude doubling over. It was so well done, you know. And I like to try out little minis, and I've tried both the DC mech stuff and the Marvel mech stuff they came out with recently, and all about your Megazord Dragonzord, man. Like it was really fun to read.
Thanks. Cullen also created like some really awesome opportunities, you know, like space in the book, page space, to draw a lot of scope and that sort of thing. And I think the first issue ending with the Dragonzord being totally trashed by Godzilla really, it puts the stakes at a level that you're like, wow, this is really serious. And even Tommy's reaction when he's like, oh my God, he just trashed the Dragonzord. Like, how powerful is this guy? You know? So part of the hopefully I'm able to, you know, connect with what it is that Cullen's intent is, and, you know, make that a visual that everyone can participate in or something. So I appreciate the opportunities he gave me in the battles to do that.
As soon as I saw the atomic breath building, I knew it was coming. I was excited. You know, I'm just like, oh shit, he's about to do it.
It's not going good for Tommy there. Yeah. But Tommy feels like it's Tommy. All over. I've got this.
I love that you brought up the interplay between the right, because I imagine the way this works is Cullen writes the script, and then you interpret what he's written down there for you. Can you talk about how you two work together? Like, Cullen, did you write for Freddie's art, or did you just how does that work?
Well, I think initially I was writing even before Freddie. I don't remember at what point you came on to. I mean, I knew that you were the artist they wanted to have on the project, but I think they were wondering if your schedule would allow it. But typically I don't write for a specific artist, and I don't change my script format for a specific artist. And that's the case with artists I haven't worked with before, like Freddie, or artists like Brian Hurt, who I've worked with now for 20 something years. I write this, you know, my scripts are the same, because I know that the artist, you have to put trust in the artist to say, okay, Freddie's going to draw this Freddie's going to do what Freddie does, and he's going to draw it, and he's going to interpret it, and he's going to take the choice that he's going to. So like my scripts, for instance, occasionally I'll say something like, this is a big panel, but I don't do things like this panel's positioned here and this panel's positioned here, or this panel takes it, because an artist like Freddie's gonna read the script and they're gonna know what needs to be, how it needs to be laid out, what panels need to be big. They're gonna interpret it their way, because Freddie's the artist. He's he has a better visual eye than I do. And the stuff I'm not going to try to over explain it for anyone. I'm going to write my goal with every script is I want to write enough that the artist can understand the story. And, and sometimes maybe I write more. I definitely write scripts that are more detailed than some writers, but they're not as detailed as some other writers. So, yeah. And then it's going to get interpreted, it's going to get changed a little bit, and that's all well and good. That's part of the collaborative process. But no, I don't necessarily try to write for a specific artist. I mean, as I'm writing it, it's impossible not to think of it in my head. This is what I think Freddie's going to do with it, but I don't necessarily change my scripting process for it.
Yeah, and when I came on, I know for sure you had a pretty detailed outline of what you were going to do with the whole, all 5 of the issues, and I think that it was coincidental that I really vibed with where you were going anyway. Like, so we were speaking in a similar language or similar wavelength already, and yeah, Cullen is very open to, like, if I had questions or if I had suggestions on different ways of pacing certain scenes. There was a really generous give and take with that kind of stuff, that's a real gift to me as an artist, that the script is written in a way that it makes total sense. There's no ambiguity. And then also flexibility, that if I had an idea of breaking this panel into 2 or 3, or combining this 2 or 3 panels into one bigger one or whatever, that, we were, in step with that. And it was, so I think that, mechanically, I would basically receive the script fully formed. If I had questions, I would ask them. I would then come up with rough layouts so everyone could have a chance to, chime in if I had misinterpreted a scene, or if I wanted to combine or extract things, whatever, for pacing reasons. But if I've missed the point of something, that's an opportunity for everyone to say, or specifically Cullen to say, this feels like it's being rushed too much, or this feels like it's being drawn out too much, or whatever it might be. But at that point, all of us are just looking at it I think everyone's looking at it as what's going to make for the best comic. And none of us are getting our, bringing an ego into it. It's just more about hopefully what everyone likes the most. And then from there, I do, and those roughs are usually really rough, because I'm expecting there to be some give and take. So I'm not wasting a lot of time getting all the faces drawn, and they're just like really squiggly things. And then the next step is I'll create structure drawings for everything. And that's actually the phase that takes the longest, because I'm trying to get all costume details correct, and facial proportions and all that sort of stuff correct. And then we look over that, I send it out to everyone to make sure, did I have the number of, or the exact symbol on the Green Ranger's chest exactly right, like the 2 tridents and the arrows, just, we want everyone to be in agreement, including Toho and or Boom Studios, who's looking at the Power Ranger stuff, to make sure that I'm not doing something incorrect or using an incorrect piece of reference. And then after that, it's the ink wash stage. So throughout it, I'm trying to keep everyone in the loop to make sure I'm not going too far afield, because I don't want to have to correct a bunch of stuff later on. Too, it's like self-preservation in that way too.
And you don't want to cross the Power Ranger fan base with an incorrect decal or logo or costume design either. My diehard adult Power Ranger friends are like, look at this freaking Power Ranger shoe they released. It's garbage. And I'm just like, what the hell? Like, it should have 3 teeth on the dinosaur's head. I'm just like, so the fans appreciate that step as well, I'm sure.
I don't know if my work would hold up to that kind of scrutiny, but I hope so. I tried very hard to. Yeah, Toho and Boom provided a lot of reference material, so I tried, and I'm sure I still got stuff wrong or whatever, but I tried very hard to make sure, and I think also with the type of scenes that Cullen wrote, it feels correct. So I think there's more of a forgiving. Cullen has done such a good job of knowing what this is, meaning how the two forces collide and how the world that they exist in, that it kind of makes it a fun environment for all the fans or the readers to be in already. Yeah. So if I got something wrong, that might be a little bit more forgiving.
Well, you benefit. Right. Yeah, you benefit greatly from the frenetic pace. There's almost no time to slow down and look at the details of the costumes and things like that. It's like, that looks good. Oh my God, Megazord's getting punched in the stomach. That giant chicken has space diamond claws.
Yeah,
like
he sure does.
Let's keep moving. We got a couple more issues to get through. So
you put space in front of anything, automatically.
Oh, that space diamond line, man. Just
he does have
highlight of my day.
Gigan is the first monster to make Godzilla bleed. Godzilla doesn't bleed in any of the movies until Gigan fights him.
That's cool trivia.
Yeah,
that is cool trivia.
But yeah, space diamonds.
Space diamonds.
That's all it takes.
That's what you get.
Space diamonds.
What are we got about 15 minutes left. What are we consuming right now? What are you working on as well? Maybe a mixture of both.
First, I want to say that the Godzilla Power Rangers trade comes out this week. I don't know when this will air, but I had seen some people had already gotten their copy, which is why I didn't know if you guys had already gotten yours. Like 3 people said that they got it early. So, but it should be coming out. I think tomorrow is actually when it's released, which is November the 9th. But the stuff I'm working on, I did some work for DC on their Dark Crisis book.
Cool.
One of their prelude one shots or most of it, and then now I'm doing some, actually I don't think I'm supposed to say another short story for them, and just some covers for Power Rangers Ninja Turtles Volume 2. So that's what is occupying me. What are you working on, Cullen?
I got a bunch of creator-owned stuff that I'm doing. I am working on a series called Door to Door Night by Night for Vault, which is a new horror ongoing. It was a limited series, but it got upgraded to an ongoing because initial orders were so strong on it.
Awesome.
That comes out on November 16th or 17th, whatever Wednesday's around that day.
Yeah.
So I'm working on that series. I'm working on a new series for Source Point called Night Walkers, which is sort of my take on an apocalyptic vampire story.
Ooh.
And I'm working on a bunch of other stuff that has not been announced yet. So the stuff I can't say. I might be doing something for Marvel after a hiatus from working for Marvel for a while. I might be working on something new for them.
Awesome.
But I can't say. And then as far as stuff I'm consuming, it's everything. All these.
Yeah.
And just to keep it on theme for Godzilla, I just watched, it was either this morning, it was yesterday afternoon, on the official Godzilla YouTube channel, they released a short movie called Godzilla versus Gigan Rex. And it's like a 10-minute movie, and I don't remember the creator's name. If I understand the history of where it came from, this creator did like a very short, video of CGI video, a computer-generated movie of Godzilla and Gigan. And Toho greenlit like a 10-minute, 11-minute movie. And it's awesome. You'll never look at space chickens the same way because it's really cool.
I just pulled it up while we were talking, and it's the screen teaser is really good looking.
It's really fun. It feels like a Godzilla movie from a 90s Heisei era Godzilla movie to some degree. So it's a lot of fun. And if you're a Godzilla fan, I definitely recommend checking it out.
Now, I know you can't talk much about your new vampire story, but can you tell me if space diamonds make an appearance? Because that does seem like it would be effective against vampires most of the time.
There are no space diamonds in that story. Although, if I were to pan my camera over in this direction, you'd see my board of projects, everything I'm working on and everything I'm currently pitching, and you might see something that has potential for space diamonds. Okay. That's all I can say. I can say no more.
Okay, so
deal.
Just like Tarantino has red apple cigarettes. I think in the Bunniverse, which
Space Diamonds.
Space Diamonds is it.
All right, I'm gonna write it down. I'm gonna start adding that to everything.
All right. Yes.
Even if it's just like the name of like the local cocaine or
I don't know that Toho would want me to associate a particular brand of cocaine.
That's why I'm not. That's why I don't work. I mean, it would just be everything. I'd just be like,
I'm gonna write it down. I'm putting it down. Space Diamonds.
The next volume of Bone Parish. You could, instead of Bone Dust, it could be Space Diamond Dust.
Yeah.
Now we're helping. Now we're part of the writing process. This is all.
Yeah.
Hey, Cullen, you're a vital part of that process.
Look, it's all we ever wanted. That's why we started doing interviews.
Hey, Cullen, what's that bust that's over on your comic rack behind you? Is that a Nosferatu, or is that what character is that?
That is Swampwater the Witch. So speaking of YouTube, if you go to YouTube and search Swampwater, not Swamp Water, Swampwater with a U, you'll find a short horror movie that I wrote with my friend Heath Amodio. You'll find a short horror movie that you can watch that features. That's the prosthetic we used in the making of that movie.
Swamp
with a U.
I'm from the swamp.
I'm from the swamp.
Awesome. I'll check that out.
Super exciting for all of our Midwest viewers here. Freddie, what part of Kansas are you from?
Well, I was born in Arkansas, but I moved to Kansas City whenever I was very, very young. So I grew up there, Wyandotte County, went to Washington High School. Some people might know what that is. And then now I live near Lee Summit, which is just outside of Kansas City, Missouri. So still very much in that same area.
The good side of the line, as we'd say.
I don't know. I spent a lot of time in Bonner Springs. I have very fond memories of Bonner Springs whenever I was growing up. So I don't know, all over in Kansas, I guess.
All right. So our final question is me again for both of you, of course. We have our final question is always the same. So after this, again, we're going to go over where we can find you online and stuff to look for, which I think we kind of just did, but we can also recapture that. Okay. So we are called Shortboxed. It's our company name. It started because we always used to ask each other the question, sort of a top 5, what would be in your Shortboxed? If you had to take one box with you to a desert island, it's the only thing you ever got to read again. The short box is about, got one near me, this long. So basically we typically ask for 5 things, which is easier when we send out written interviews, but like what 5 stories, and it can be kind of in any media you want, would fit in your short box?
I think it'll be easy for me to answer this. Cullen's probably read so much stuff, he might have to sub-process to get his list together. But for me, it would be the 2-part story of What Goes Around Comes Around, and then Ninja Turtles, and then issue 8 or whatever it was in the regular Mirage Ninja Turtle stories. That's like where Leonardo's in the city, he's training, the Foot Clan ambush him, Shredder returns, and they throw him through the window. It was kind of the basis for the 1990s film. It was one of the stories, but they made it Raphael instead of Leo. That's my favorite Ninja Turtles story. And nice. So that would be, or if I could just bring the whole Mirage line, of course, that. Elf Quest by Wendy and Richard Peeney. That I love Elf Quest. It helped to bring my wife and I together. We share a love for Elf Quest, and we have a bunch of their art books over there. And so you said 5 things, probably Jim Lee's that X-Men series that's 1 through 7 or 8, whatever. That was incredibly popular, obviously, but it also helped to define my artistic choices or tastes in mainstream comics. Probably the collected works of Travis Charest. I say that because he hasn't produced he's not particularly prolific, but he's an amazing artist. Maybe his Wildcat stuff or whatever. And then let's see, I'm trying to think of the last one. All of as much of the Hellboy stuff as I could take. Mike Mignola's Hellboy specifically, and then I'm set.
Well, I love Hellboy. I'm a big Hellboy fan. I have a bunch of his, because he's like 4 first appearances. I have a bunch of his appearances on top of like a Funko Pop in my other room. So it's got a
Yeah.
place in my living room.
Oh, is it my turn?
You're up.
Moment of truth, Cullen. What you got?
All right, so
forever. So
I would bring Micronauts, the original Marvel run of Micronauts.
and you worked on Micronauts, right?
I did, but I didn't get to do what I wanted to do with it. I feel like I feel like there's a better Micronaut story in here somewhere.
Nice.
But that aside, yeah, Micronauts I thought was such an amazing exercise in world building from that original 50-something issue series. So great. So I'd want to bring that. I would bring the novella Dead in the West by Joe Lansdale, which he calls it a zombie Western, but it's just a little novella. I read it a couple of times a year. It's awesome. I would bring Boy's Life by Robert McCammon, which is this giant, massive novel. McCammon's mainly known as a horror writer, but this novel kind of transcends horror. It's a murder mystery, but it's also about growing up in a southern town in Alabama, and all the weird magical realism that goes on around when you're a kid, when you're a teenage boy and you're growing up and these weird things are happening. It is chef's kiss of a novel. It's amazing. I would bring The Thing, because I'm assuming there's a DVD player or a Blu-ray player on this desert island. So I bring The Thing.
That's cheating. That's cheating.
No. And I'm going to cheat more then, because then I would bring. They released this awesome. It looks like a book of the Showa era of the Godzilla movies, and you open it up and it's got all the Blu-rays of the Showa era Godzillas. So I bring that because, hey, we're talking about Godzilla. I gotta keep it real. I gotta keep it legit on the Godzilla tip.
Yeah, so I think having movies is fine. I think Crowe, wasn't it like J.H. Williams we were interviewing, and he had a bunch of music he would have included in the box. I mean, there's
music. He can hum.
I think that totally counts. Also, very specific. Excellent. There's been a couple of people who are like, I'm not going to answer that.
Really?
I mean, if you ask me tomorrow, it's going to be a completely different list.
That's fine. That's fine. Yeah. No, I have a question that kind of came up while you guys were talking. Well, you were just talking, Cullen.
4 minutes.
What are
really quick?
Okay. IPs that you would want to work on. You guys have already gotten your hands in some cool sandboxes, gotten to play around with some childhood characters and fandoms that I'm sure you didn't expect when you started doing what you're doing. If you could just put it out there into the world so that the IDW gods or whoever else owns these properties takes note, which franchises or IP would you guys like to work on next or in the future?
You go first, Cullen, because I went first last time.
All right. There's a bunch. There's a bunch that, from the nostalgia, the nostalgia in my brain makes me want to work on. Probably the one that I've there's a couple that I've, like Big Trouble in Little China, Escape from New York. But the one I really think of the most, and I've even like reached out to people to try to make happen, is Phantasm, and I would love to do something in the world of Phantasm.
Yeah,
that creeped me out when I was a kid. There's some scenes burnt into my brain on that one. I think for me it would be if I could somehow swing a Daredevil Ninja Turtles crossover, that would be after that I could just be struck by lightning and die. My life would be fulfilled. Aside from that, Captain America, Wolverine, something in that World War II era, putting them both in that, if that could ever be swung, I would love to draw something like that, like a mini series of them.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. I don't know, probably a bunch of other stuff, but that's
I'm sure, right
off the top of my head.
I love the idea of the foot and the hand meeting and just being like, we're the same.
Just like,
their greeting would be very strange. The hand would reach down to the foot and they'd shake.
They'd
hand to foot. That's how they greet each other. You never know.
Stop talking, Freddie. You're talking yourself out of this job. I'm telling you.
Well, we'll edit it. I swear. Colin, I like how you got the early Kurt Russell stuff. So maybe we can also get in the Overboard universe, little Goldie Hawn.
Hey, I'm not Soldier, Overboard. I celebrate Kurt Russell's entire catalog.
I heard
Captain Ron.
Why not? You think I have no problem with Captain Ron.
Big Trouble in Little China is hands down one of my favorite movies of all time.
It's
I
insanely
can
good.
watch that. Yeah, it's insanely
So
good.
funny. Well, it's just
Yeah.
Cullen, there's gosh, we're done here, but there is a podcast I'll send you where they look at Kurt Russell and talk about how important he was as an actor, unironically, due to his like send up of like the typical action hero tropes.
I'd listen to that.
I'll send it to the thread.
Yeah.
All right. Everybody, thank you again for joining us. This has been Freddie Williams II and Cullen Bunn along with the Shortbox crew. So we'll catch you on the flip side.
Thanks, guys.
We'll catch you on the flip side.
On the flip flop.